This is very exciting. So welcome to the show, Meghan Price. You're our first female guest. I think that's really awesome and bold of you, but we do want to build the platform to have just like a more balanced presence. And like, there's a lot of the stuff that, the guys and I've been going back and forth on that it's like fun and stuff. But like, as we start to get into like talking about our feelings and like emotional health and things like that, like it just became apparent to me that it's like, I think we need more of a feminine presence. It doesn't have to be a female body person, but I wanted to extend the invite to you. And just a little introduction to anybody that's listening to this or watches the show. I met Meghan, I forget what year it was, but it was definitely at Omega Institute. And I don't know that we kicked it all that much, but one thing I do remember for sure was that you took the Alex Gray workshop. And that to me is always just like, all right, what is she up to? Why are you in Alex Gray? What attracted you to that? Were you like using psychedelics at that time? Is that like something that put you on your spiritual path or?
Yeah, totally. So that was actually in 2012. So a little over 8 years ago now, which is like wild to even think about. And also thank you for having me on the show. I'm very grateful to be here. And yeah, so I was kind of using psychedelics at that time, but not regularly. But yeah, definitely like between the years of 2010 and 2009, I guess, and 2013, that was like my period of hallucinogenic, like psychedelic use, mainly hallucinogens. And I wasn't using them really at the Omega Institute so much, but at that period of my life, I was using psychedelics. And yeah, I guess what attracted me to the Alex Gray workshop is I've always had an interest in art, and particularly painting and drawing and sculpting, but really art of any kind. But I just I never really had like trained skills in visionary art, especially the type that he does, where he kind of takes this metaphysical, energetic vision that he has and then puts it on paper or on whatever canvas or whatever media he's using. And I think that that's like such an incredible gift. So I was always inspired by his art and by his use of anatomy and energy and his ability to express and display that. So yeah, that was kind of what drew me to that particular workshop in 2012. But I did quite a few workshops at the Omega Institute that had to do with, I'm really interested in anatomy and physiology. So in like the science behind things. And that's particularly what drew me to him. And I took quite a few workshops at the Omega Institute during that year and previous years that all kind of had that similar approach of different ways of looking at anatomy and physiology, whether it was through meditation or movement or art. So yeah, that was kind of like the common thread between them all.
Like, are you talking about you're doing like yoga workshops as well, or like a yoga teacher training, or I mean, there's so much to like how your body is supposed to, there's techniques that are suggested that you should sit with a straight spine, but like most of us that are hunched over on our computers or looking at our phones just in this day and age, like we have to do a lot of work to even get to that, to get to that level and like release our, the myofascia that's like kind of has our muscles stuck like that, right?
Right, totally. And it was, yeah, yoga workshops, but also I did a cell level healing with Dr. Joyce Hawks in 2011 at the Omega Institute. And she does like a lot of meditation with the skeletal system, the cardiovascular system, the different organs of our body. And I think that, that really complements kind of Alex Gray's style of art, because, if you have a visual awareness of what certain parts of your body look like, you can do some really amazing in-depth meditations and work mentally with your physical body. And I also took some workshops on acupuncture and acupressure, so kind of a more Chinese approach to the culturally Indian approach of yoga. So yeah, quite a few different approaches to anatomy and physiology and the structure of our physical body.
And is that what you're continuing to study now?
Kind of. Okay, so since then I've been on like a whirlwind of life.
Yeah.
So I had my own uh, kind of series of health concerns and health issues, a lot of chronic disease, a lot of autoimmune disorders, which actually led me to the Omega Institute. And my background is in allopathic medicine. So I was pre-med in undergraduate school, and like on the straight and narrow path to medical school, like conventional allopathic medicine. And then I started having seizures and kind of a series of health issues or illness, I guess you could consider them, but it really was kind of an awakening, especially the seizures. A lot of people kind of relate seizures as to out of body experiences, or they're kind of in some ways like near death experiences, depending on how intense they are. And some of them actually were instigated by hallucinogens and psychedelics, but some of them weren't. So it was interesting. Time in my life, and that actually prevented me from going to medical school and took me to the Omega Institute. So my first summer where I met you at the Omega Institute, where I was working there doing like the work study, volunteer kind of thing.
Yeah.
That was actually right after I had graduated from undergrad at LSU with my background in allopathic medicine, and I was supposed to be going to medical school at that time. And instead, I went to the Omega Institute, and that was kind of my first real like intensive exposure to alternative and complementary medicine.
Mm.
And then from there, I had this really awakening, eye-opening experience to the world of complementary and alternative medicine, systems of medicine in China, in Japan, in India, pretty much anywhere in Asia that was, more ancient than our system of medicine in the West. And so I started traveling to those countries to figure more out about it. And a lot of the intention behind those travels was so I could basically heal myself, because another thing about these autoimmune disorders and seizures and things I was experiencing physically and mentally in my own self, they weren't they not only were they not curable by Western medicine and the doctors that I was seeing and the specialists I was seeing, an allergy specialist for allergies that I was having, a neurologist for the seizures, various specialists for different symptoms I was experiencing, but no one was communicating. And it was very clear that they were all connected. So basically, they couldn't even give me proper diagnoses. They were saying, well, maybe it's lupus, maybe it's psoriasis, maybe you have epilepsy, maybe it's this. And they kept changing the diagnoses. And really never came up with anything that they were confident in. So I really was kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, because it was affecting my quality of life. Like I couldn't, some of the illnesses and symptoms I was experiencing literally impeded me from living. So there were times in which I just had to, lay in bed all day because I was having an allergic reaction, or I was having seizures, and I was scared that if I would try and get in a car or drive, that I would have a seizure and have some more near death experiences, or more trouble that I couldn't handle. So yeah, essentially that's what instigated a lot of my studies. And I know this is like a long story background, but so now I'm back. I recently returned from India in July, where I was studying Ayurveda, which is India's traditional system of medicine. And I got coronavirus in India in
Oh,
March.
wow.
And yeah.
That's
And
the
it's
first. I have not heard anybody say that to me yet. That's a good one.
really,
Coronavirus while they're traveling through India, that's intense. I mean, it must have
it
been.
was, yeah, it was definitely intense. But honestly, it wasn't totally shocking in many ways, because I kind of like to tell people that I'm a virus magnet. And when I was studying Mayan medicine in Guatemala, I got Zika virus.
Oh, wow.
I was studying,
Goodness.
yeah, exactly. So it like happens honestly a lot when I travel. Traveling has been really amazing, but it hasn't come with its own karma and hardships. And in Mexico, I got chikungunya virus, which is another mosquito virus. So I've definitely had picked up viruses along the way as I traveled to study how to heal myself. And in many ways, I think that's kind of why I get these viruses, because when I was in India and got coronavirus, I had some very intense experiences where I felt like the virus was talking to me, and I was downloading messages of sorts of what the virus was trying to communicate on a larger scale. And I think that unless I actually contracted the virus and had that experience, I wouldn't have gotten those messages, you know? So
So,
yeah, and
do you recall anything that you think the virus was saying to you? What up, Aaron?
hi.
It's always like the first 2 minutes of the Zoom call, you have to mess with the settings.
Right. It's like, can you hear me? That's when I first logged in, I couldn't hear you either. So
Yeah.
man, y'all have great backgrounds. I'm jealous.
Yeah, this is my house. I built this house. I built this city.
Amazing. Looks like a paradise.
Yeah, it's pretty nice.
So Meghan was just telling this story about how she got coronavirus in India and then was starting to tap into like potentially receiving messages from the virus, and that's just right when you walked in. So
oh wow, great.
Yeah, it's just like it's an interesting point to join the conversation.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so there were a lot of messages from this virus that I kind of downloaded personally, and some of them are in some ways like ineffable. Like it's really difficult to put words to these energies and just messages that I was getting, if that makes sense, because they weren't like verbal messages. Some of them are very easy to put into words, but some of it was just like so intense. Like I'm sure, I don't know your experience really with psychedelics, but sometimes you have these downloads and these experiences that it's just like, you know, like a fire hose into your mouth. So it's just like so much, you can't even really articulate all of it. But a lot of it was just like bigger picture messages, you know, that as far as, you know, ecology and economy and how humans exist in relation to nature on this planet. And, you know, as we've seen with coronavirus, there's been a huge drop in emissions and greenhouse gases and carbon production and you know, our carbon footprint in general globally, you know, in India and China and America. And that's been really great for the environment. And in many ways, those were the types of messages I was getting, like this is a time to slow down, to go within. And also it really relates to health and wellness in general, because I really think that something that Ayurveda teaches that's really beautiful is that anything can be medicine and anything can be poison. It just depends on the person and the intention behind it. And I really think that viruses can be medicine, as weird as that is. They can be very healing and very cleansing and therapeutic in some ways, and they can also be very awakening and enlightening. And I think that just like anything can be medicine and anything can be poison, anything can be awakening and anything can be, you know, progress, kind of like a catalyst on your path towards greater awareness, enlightenment, kind of whatever you want to call that. So I think that, you know, those two things coincide as far as things that can be medicinal and therapeutic and healing, but also things that raise your vibration and evolve the consciousness of humanity. And that's kind of, I guess, like without going into too much detail of the messages, because we could be on here for hours as far as the messages that I received. But those are kind of two general things that really this virus is karmic, and really it can be healing in a lot of ways, and it can be you know, when we experience disease in our bodies, we experience a lot of destruction, but, you know, there's a lot of construction that comes after the destruction. And usually the construction that comes after the destruction is coming with a greater awareness. So it's coming with a higher vibration, essentially.
I did want to scale back just because you talked about the psychedelic. You're referring to psychedelics and how they can be really intense, you know, and yeah, I think I feel like I have pretty confident with my experience with them. But there's a lot of people that I think now are getting into microdosing, and I really encourage people to do that, because I think that, like you said, like it's one thing to get a heroic dose and have this huge blow your mind experience, but it's almost like there's no way that you can really remember all of that the next day or the following month or two. Whereas if you're microdosing and you're like, you're giving yourself the chance to kind of like break down these messages, like it takes a long time to understand something you don't have a word for.
Right.
And I don't know that I got any messages from the coronavirus, but one night, right when it was starting to happen, like I had this dream, and it was like I could see the virus, like I could literally see it, and like it had like all of these different elements. And then next thing you know, maybe a week or two later, it's like everybody's drawing this, everybody, there's a new emoji for it. And it was just like, whoa, this thing like arrived, is what it felt like.
Yeah, totally. And I totally can relate to that. I felt like whenever I was having these messages, there, a lot of them were visual, which is kind of, you know, part of how it's difficult to put them into words, because that's just kind of two different planes of expression and how they appear. But yeah, totally. It's, you know, I felt like everything that I was experiencing individually, we were experiencing collectively. And I can definitely get on board with your microdosing theory, because I feel like in many ways, you know, anything that we experience mentally or spiritually, we're also experiencing physically. So a lot of you know, psychedelic experiences or just experiences in general are stored somatically in the body. And I think that although, you know, if we have an intense psychedelic experience, we can't necessarily recall or remember it mentally, but our body kind of stores it in a way. So there is still that aspect, which I think is worth noting. But I think just in this day and age, you know, something I've also experienced personally with psychedelics and with any type of substance really is that it's not always the substance that leads to the experience. You know, like I've had dozens of mushroom trips or LSD trips that have, everyone has been unique, and some of them have been the exact same dosage of mushrooms and the exact same cap of mushroom, but then the experience was much more intense versus like barely even there. And I think a lot of that just has to do with, you know, energetically where you are in life, and mentally what your headspace is like that day, and spiritually how you're aligned, and physically like how pure your physical body is at that moment. And really, I think that, you know, psychedelics are a great way to get you to a certain state, but ultimately it's our kind of consciousness and our spirit that kind of takes over from there. So in many ways, yeah, that's kind of what led me to meditation and led me to stop using psychedelics, because I could get to these states. You know, you start with larger doses of psychedelics and then you go to more micro doses, and you can achieve these states of consciousness that are amazing, and you have these realizations and these awakenings that are life changing really. But in many ways they're not sustainable. You have them, and then it's like you want to grab onto it and then it vanishes and it goes. But with meditation, it's much more sustainable. You can achieve those states of consciousness and those energetic alignments, and you can stay there for longer periods of time. And I think that that's really what drew me to yoga and meditation and all of that world.
I'm trying to get Aaron in here, trying to loop him in. Did we lose audio from Aaron again?
I think so. He looked like he was mumbling something.
Oh man.
But he's got the background.
I know. It's always funny when it's like two audio engineers can't possibly figure out how to get the mics to work. um, so let's say like your typical day, and like I'm asking you like an honest question, or typical week even, like, are you practicing yoga, 5 days a week? Is it 7 days a week? Do you have a meditation practice that you do every day? And like, we are live on Facebook. You don't have to look like, a certain way, because I mean, there's a class that I like to take, and I'm lucky if I hit it like twice a week, really, to be honest.
Yeah. I love that question. And honestly, I'm really like, I guess like I wouldn't use the word proud, but just like in love with the ability to share honestly and not have any type of qualm about it. But yeah, I meditate every day, at least 30 minutes a day, once in the morning and once in the evening, depending on, like how much time I have that day. So this also kind of relates to what I'm doing now in life. So after I got back from India, I actually started a master's program at Tulane University in health leadership to kind of help catalyze the integration of Ayurveda and Chinese medicine and any alternative and complementary system into our public health system because of coronavirus. So with that being said, I'm now in school for my master's degree and I'm working for Tulane part-time. So I'm a lot busier than I was in India or than I was before. But really what keeps me stable and clear and able to sustain my energy, because essentially I'm one of those long haulers when it comes to COVID. I still have moments of complete fatigue, moments of dizziness and lightheadedness. My lung capacity is definitely not what it used to be. There are I think now around a dozen different strains of coronavirus, and I think probably the one that I contracted in India was different than what a lot of people are contracting here, but it keeps mutating, so who really knows? But what's kept me energized and able to continue to pursue my master's degree and work and start a business and all of the things that I'm doing is my yoga and meditation practice. So to answer your question in a verbose form, I practice yoga probably 4 times a week and I meditate every day. So yoga is kind of the first thing to drop off my schedule if I don't have time to do anything, but the meditation is really what keeps me grounded and keeps me clear and sane and motivated and connected. So there's hardly ever a day in 365 days of the year that I don't meditate. But that's something that is new within the last year, because prior to moving to India, I was definitely off my meditation game. So it's been consistent for about a year now.
What kind of meditation do you do?
So I do various meditations. I usually start off with mindfulness meditation, so kind of bringing my awareness to my breath, and then I switch to japa meditation. So depending on the day and what I'm wanting to call into my life and what energies and archetypes I'm looking to connect with, I'll use different mantras. And then a kind of meditation that I received from my guru in India. Her name is Amma. I don't know if you all have ever met Amma. I know, Jesse, that Amma has come to New York before. So, and a lot of people from the Institute would go visit her in New York City. But she is, it's so strange to say, honestly, it's not comfortable still to be like, she's my guru, but she is one of the main teachers that I follow. And so I've done a few silent retreats with her, and she has taught me a meditation that is kind of like the pinnacle of my meditation every day, which is, so yeah, it starts off with mindfulness and then goes to mantra and then goes to a meditation that she taught. So it's kind of like a gradual scale that kind of hones in your awareness.
So over the course of like your, say, 30-minute session, you will like kind of do maybe 10 minutes of mindfulness, just kind of center yourself, then do some mantra work, and then do this other meditation that she taught you.
Exactly. And depending on the headspace I'm in, sometimes I'll just do mantra, like if I don't have the headspace to go deeper, because essentially what she's taught us and the kind of pinnacle of my meditation is kind of this concentration format before nothingness. And if I'm not in the headspace to go there, I'll just stop at mantra. Essentially that is, that's a good way to break it down.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think that's cool, because I think there's a lot of like I personally will filter through kind of a lot of different kind of techniques, and I think there's something to a lot of people get really, and I can't discount it, a lot of people get really focused on one type, and then they sort of just think like, this is the only type that I need to do. And I think that like it's unfortunate that we call we only have like one word for meditation, because to me they're like there's so many different like things. Like mindfulness is its own thing, and it's its own like meta skill almost, that's like really important no matter what you do. But then, you know, having certain mantras or breath work or other things, they all do different things. Some calm you down, some bring you up, you know, depending on what like what kind of experience you're trying to have. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, totally. I 100% agree with that. And in many ways, I could relate that to, you know, traditional medicine. People think that, you know, you need to stick with one form of yoga or one form of medicine and, you know, just Ayurveda or Chinese medicine is the best. And really it's, I think like, I'm a huge fan of the cafeteria, whatever, cafeteria spirituality, cafeteria medicine, like different things work for different intentions. And you know, even mantra meditation, I think in some ways can almost be considered more of a form of prayer because it is actively expression. There's not, you know, what comes after that is meditation, but really that's more of like a concentration, like a dhyana that you're using to pray to get you to a point of meditation. So people call mantra meditation, but really in many ways, I think that a lot of what we call meditation isn't actually meditation.
Mhm.
So last winter, I got to work at this another retreat center in the Hudson Valley, and we were locked down there, and we had about 300 acres of like just raw mountains to run around. It was super cool. Tons of trails, but then there was tons of like not trails too. So I was really big into, of course, I love my psychedelic mushrooms, but then also hunting the actual mushrooms in the wintertime. The chaga is like a big mushroom you can get up
Oh,
here,
nice.
real big chunks, you know. And so I would go up there, and you know, sometimes you score and you come home early, but then there's other times where you couldn't seem to find it, you know, no matter what. And just through being at that center, like at one point somebody was like, "Oh, try like Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare," like just say that like over and over and over and over if you need to like get yourself in this rhythm, you know. So like here I am, like, and I swear every time I'd be like 15 or 20 minutes into this Hare Krishna chant, and I don't know if it's like, is Krishna giving you the mushroom, or is it like you're just so relaxed and you're like, you're like in your rhythm, you know, like that's where I think all of these things are just like trying to get us, whether it's like a mala bead that you're doing like this on, or there's some sort of rhythm that you get into on your surfboard or your snowboard or whatever, like that to me is meditation, when you're just really there. And again, it's one of those things that's like, no words really describe it, but like you know it when you did it, you know what I mean? Like you can't fake it, sort of.
Totally. Yeah, it's kind of like that in like, you know, I feel like in the 90s it was like in the zone. Now it's like in flow. You know, it's
Mhm.
like koi or any other type of aerial art or yeah, snowboarding, skiing, wakeboarding, anything on a board, anything where you're like really like connecting with nature, like you're saying. And I think that that is definitely a form of meditation for sure. And I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, I think there's a part of it that seems to me that it's like especially with mantra in general, though there are different kinds, it seems a lot of it is like you give your sort of thought mind, you know, your default mind or whatever, something to do. Because like if you're trying to focus really heavily on like the small things, like say you're walking looking for mushrooms or whatever, you're right when you're really focused on it, your vision actually gets smaller because your pupils change. So you're like, all right, I'm looking for the mushroom, and the longer that you take, the more stress gets created and the more focus. And so it's probably something like, well, giving yourself something else to do, giving your conscious mind something to do, allows your gaze to widen, and therefore your perception actually to get wider. And so it's like, you know, you're more able to see things that you don't. It's kind of the same thing. Like when you are in flow, you make connections that you wouldn't have consciously thought of. You're just like, oh, this is a good idea, why don't I just do this, or why don't I, you know, go here or something like that. And I think that's part of the magic of it.
Definitely. I think that there is an element of like divine grace, as I would like to call it. So I always feel like that brings humility, and it's important to note that for me. But I know that people, you know, don't have a lot of connection to the divine, and flow doesn't kind of necessarily have that connection for them. But I think, you know, like you're saying, it is a lot of just a different state of awareness, and you're not so hyper focused on one particular thing. But Jesse, to speak to like even just the Hare Hare Krishna mantra, I think that just opens you to like this form of divine grace, which, you know, depending, you know, who knows how much of an effect that has, but I think it is worth noting.
It's interesting because I think like so I've been really into this sort of I don't know really what to call it. I guess it's like a model of reality or something like that, but it's called transurfing. Have you ever heard of that?
Mm-mm.
They have so it's sort of adjacent to like kind of law of attraction sort of stuff, but it has a bit more of a technical flavor to it. But they kind of have this notion of like everything is just these like energy pendulums, and so your emotions and stuff kind of sweep through, and the goal is to be aware of them but not to feed them, but to learn how to ride them to the lifeline that you sort of want. But he talks a lot about one of the big things in trying to find like achieve your goals or live the life that you really want to live is you have to decrease importance. So the more importance that you give something, he says what it does is it creates excess potential, and that the nature normally just wants to exist, like ideally wants to be a vacuum. Everything is just the same. And so when you create excess importance for something, you pull it out of balance, and you therefore create like a tension, which then will swing back the opposite way. And so he says what the goal is to always sort of move through life. And if you're starting to get really tense or stressed out or, you know, upset, it's because you're giving whatever situation you're in too much importance. And so I think that, you know, one thing that could be especially useful of something like Hare Krishna, although, you know, you probably could substitute it with any kind of secular mantra, but having something like that, it does, a belief in a higher system can sort of calm you down. You're like, because I offer it so that no matter what the outcome is, it is divinely inspired or something. A force that is bigger than me is giving me exactly what I need and not what I necessarily want. So if you don't find mushrooms for 10 minutes, you're like, that's fine. I'm just doing my chanting. That's not, the mushrooms are secondary, you know, so it can kind of be a technique to decrease importance perhaps.
Yeah, definitely. I love that, you know, particular perspective, because I actually spent quite a few years, like 4 years, really diving deep into Western occultism, particularly the esoteric mystical Kabbalah. I don't know if you all know anything about the tree of life. But yeah, basically they're really big into will and personal will and, you know, manifestation, magic, all of that. And I think that one of my favorite things that I came across during my studies of Western occultism was this idea of buoyant expectation. And really it's quite similar to, you know, the Eastern philosophy of non-attachment, but it has more, instead of, you know, non-attachment was essentially be this buoyancy, whereas I feel like the expectation portion really lends itself to Western mindset and Western theology and Western occultism, because it does have that aspect of will. It's this buoyant expectation where you're not, you know, necessarily stressed or hyper focused on it. It is buoyant. It's not a heavy expectation, but it does have that element of will, which I think is really powerful and important.
That's really cool. Who was do you remember like who specifically kind of suggested that?
You know, have you ever heard of I do a lot with the tarot. Have you ever heard
Uh-huh.
the Rabbi's Tarot? I think it was written by Dion Fortune.
That sounds familiar, but I don't think I know it. Do you know, Jesse?
No, I don't.
It's called the Rabbi's Tarot. I want to say that it was written by Dion Fortune, and I believe she kind of references that term. I don't know if she uses that term specifically, and maybe it was just a connection that I made between what she was saying. It's a really great book. I highly recommend reading it if you're interested in the tarot, especially the major arcana as
Oh,
kind
cool.
of a hero's journey. But yeah, I think that she was the one who kind of coined that term, or elements of that term that made me connect it in my own head.
Yeah. I think it's really important because the non-attachment is like the most, like non-attachment and karma are like the two most like confusing words I think for Western people when it comes to like learning about Eastern mysticism. And it's like, yeah, people kind of think that non-attachment means like apathy, and it's like I mean, they have so many cool words. Once you start getting into, especially like Tibetan Buddhism and stuff, they have so many interesting words that we take a sentence to describe, and they have a single word for it. But yeah, I think the non oh, and suffering too. That's another one. But yeah, the non-attachment is definitely, I think, that's a better way to describe it. It's not like don't care about your life, but don't be too worried about the outcomes.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think, a lot of what we experience is kind of walking this thin line between, because I think non-attachment does have a thin line before it becomes apathy, and I've walked that line myself. So it's a good point to bring up.
I'm curious. I want to go back to the tarot because I've definitely been getting really into tarot over the past year, and especially over the past few months. Yeah, I'd be curious to know, like, how do you incorporate your tarot into your practice?
So I have a really strong connection with my intuition, but I have a super busy mind. So for me, and once again, because just like everything that I do is kind of this cafeteria picking of different things that I feel a call to or feel a particular relationship with. And I think honestly, in some ways that comes from just like past life experiences. But yeah, for me, I use the tarot, and so I'm a health and wellness coach, and I use that in that way to better connect with my clients as far as because for me, health and wellness is very much physical, but it's also hugely mental and spiritual. And oftentimes illness can stem from a mental space or even a spiritual karmic space that has nothing to do with what you're doing physically. And so I incorporate tarot in my health and wellness practice to better connect and serve my clients, whether it's for clarity for kind of this mental space that they're stuck in, or if it's a connection between myself and the client that seems difficult to bridge at first. So it kind of helps clear that. And then for me personally, it's just, it's a tool of divination that sheds a lot of light on subconscious tendencies. So for me, it's like, what am I not consciously aware of? And that's what I use it for in my daily practice. And I like to do tarot readings on like a kind of cycle. So I usually do a full, do you have experience with the tarot? Do you know a lot about tarot? Okay.
Yeah, I know a fair amount. I'm definitely, I would say I'm intermediate right now.
Intermediate.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess like, yeah, on change of seasons like spring, fall, summer, etc., I'll do a full Celtic cross reading for myself and for others. And I think that it's a super, if you're familiar with the Celtic cross reading, it's super detailed. When I do them for other people, they're like minimum of an hour long, and they can go like far beyond that depending on the openness of the person. And so they're really intense, and really like there's a lot to digest in that. So I really don't recommend them that often, usually about 4 or 5 times a year. But then just for more subconscious insight and glimpses from the divine, I'll do smaller tarot readings like on the lunar cycle, so the full moon or the new moon, which are just kind of where the veil is a little bit thinner to the divine or to your spiritual aspect of yourself in the world. I'll do like 3-card readings or something like that. And if I have an intention for a day, I'll just do single card readings, like what is an energy, because they all have archetypes, right? Like every card has a different energy and has a different archetype. So if I'm feeling stuck one day, I'll just ask the tarot for insight and pull one card, and it's like, this is an energy that I can work with.
Yeah, I haven't really done more, like, because of what you said. I think when I first started, like, the Celtic cross is like, they always kind of, it's like the first one you learn about. And I think you're right. It is like, that's a pretty expert level one, because it's like, if you don't know, you're like looking up all the cards. You're like, what does this mean and stuff. So yeah, I've been doing just 1 to 3 card readings. I'll like start with 1, and then if nothing really sticks out, I'll pull out 3 and just kind of see, like, try to like, okay, how do these affect the other ones? What are they doing? Is this one looking at this one? What are their relationships? I've been really into the tarot, the Marseille tarot. And I'm curious because so I got into it to the Marseille tarot from Alejandro Jodorowsky. Do you know him?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
And he has an interesting story because he was fascinated. He's always been fascinated by tarot since he was a kid, and he would tour the world and he would find just eclectic tarot decks. And it's kind of interesting because, tarot used to be, I think we have a much more secularized approach to it now, but it used to be like it is magic, they do tell. And so there would all be all these things like, oh, this is the only true real magic tarot deck, this is the real one, but he would collect thousands of them, and he eventually met up with this French surrealist. I think it's Buñuel, not Buñuel. I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but he was a famous French surrealist, and he gave him a tarot deck as a gift because he heard that this guy really loved tarot, and he laughed at it because he's like, the Marseille tarot deck is the only real one because it doesn't give away any of the secrets. And I thought it was kind of an interesting thing because I always thought the Marseille tarot deck was like the most boring. I loved all these really cool looking ones and with great designs and stuff. But I'm curious, what is your opinion, or what tarot deck do you use, and how do you feel about different decks and stuff?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Jodorowsky's amazing. Like all of his movies and his cinematography and just his mind is just like insane. He's just like, I don't know, an amazing human. But yeah, so I use the Weight Rider deck, which I think is similar to the Marseille in the sense that a lot of people believe that's like the only, I mean, I guess there's people say that about any deck, but there's a lot of more modern decks that people are definitely not saying like, this is the only true deck, but the Weight Rider, there's like every single element to the card was drawn and illustrated and intentionally crafted down to like every line within the drape of the garment on a particular person. Every color has a significance. A white beard on a man has a significance. It's and I think that that's not only the easiest to interpret in some ways, because Jesse, you were talking about like these masculine, feminine principles earlier. And I think that for me, when I do tarot readings, before I kind of delve into each individual card, I like to take a general glance and kind of vibe check of the entire reading as far as what colors predominate and what energies predominate, whether it's masculine or feminine. So a lot of readings will be like super blue, like especially with the Weight Rider deck, with the symbology behind the colors. If you have a lot of blue in a reading, there's a lot of subconscious influence, there's a lot of water element, and like red with fire, and the wands and the pinnacles, like if you have more wands and more pinnacles, then that's definitely something that's sticking out. If you have more men figures appearing in your reading, then there's definitely a stronger masculine influence versus feminine. So yeah, I think that that's why I really, and so also to speak to like how I learned the tarot, that was when I was studying Mayan medicine in Guatemala. I took a few years actually to study the tarot intensely. And I did a 90-day meditation retreat focused on lucid dreaming and tarot study. And the last, yeah,
That's awesome.
the last 40 days of that 90-day retreat were in silence. And every day of the 40 days, we would pull a different tarot card and we would sit for 8 hours that day meditating on one single tarot card. And so, there's a lot of study you can do for the tarot, which I did preceding this particular retreat, which is basically like passed down wisdom and kind of intellectual perspective on the tarot. But when you spend 8 hours a day studying or meditating with a card, that's a totally different like relationship and download of information about a particular card. And then at night, we were supposed to be lucid dreaming with that particular card, which is a whole nother dimension of experience with that energy and with the tarot. So I think, that's another reason I particularly relate to the Weight Rider deck, because, I spent months meditating with and on these cards and lucid dreaming with them. And yeah, I also have experience with the Crowley deck and a couple other decks that I like, but nothing like the Weight Rider.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, I do that a lot. I feel like what really inspired me to get back into it was, I think there was like a documentary about this tarot reader, and he kind of eschews all extra meaning, and he was able to do these really profound readings using nothing but just what, like, visually what you see on the card. And I think, like, I was always very much like, oh, I need to read, what's the book say, and and I started with the Thoth deck, and it's just so rich in, like, symbology and, like, so many, like, little things that you can interpret, that it was almost overwhelming. It's like, oh, I don't remember what that Hebrew letter means, or like, which Sephiroth is that, and like, is that an angel, like. But and so that's why I was like, sort of like, oh, that's interesting, I want to go to the Marseille deck, because there's less there for you to get confused by, but there can be, especially when you get into numerology and colors. But I almost feel like, yeah, becoming really, like, just staring at the card, and then it's like, it's almost like a practice in like observation, like what connections can you make with these cards. And there's no rules, there's no right or wrong answer. It's like, oh, but why is that a connection that you make, that they're both looking in the same direction? What does that mean? And I think yeah, it's really fascinating.
Yeah, and
Oh
that's
man,
like a Rorschach test, it's like, what does this mean?
yeah.
Yeah. Wait, so if Aaron is a intermediate at the tarot, I am like the bare, like not even a beginner, like just don't really know that much about it. But the couple readings that I have had have been by my friend Marcy, who I know from Omega. Shout out to Marcy, she's amazing. But they've been so intense, like super intense, kind of like what you were saying. But it was probably the full cross readout. I think we went easily over an hour, and I just remember like a lot of tears and like a lot of, like, it was this whole thing of it didn't really, I mean, it felt really good afterwards, but like during the experience was a lot, so it's not something that I necessarily gravitate to. But I was wondering if you could speak to that, because that is something that like just going back to the masculine feminine energies that are both within us, or within all beings. Like for me to be in a male body, in the way that I've like lived so far, it's much easier for me to do like masculine stuff. It's easy for me to hop on a mountain bike and crush out 50 miles, or go train martial arts, go skate, just be gnarly with the dudes. That is my go-to. And like I really shy away from like what I would say is my feminine energy, which has a lot to do with my mental health. And then sometimes I get in there and it's like Marcy's like, holy shit, she's probably pulling up stuff from, so like, what do you never do this ever to yourself? So I just was wondering if there's like, because it can go both ways, right? Like some people can be really into their feminine energy, and it's like, hey, like you don't have to be a marathon runner, but like get out to the gym twice a week, like break a sweat, like that's good for you, like. So it can swing both ways. I know, at least up to this point, I've just been very much like, I'm going to be the alpha male. That's like where I belong, whether that's true or not. It's just like, that's where I gravitate to naturally.
Yeah. Well, I can definitely relate to that, because, and honestly, I feel like I always like attributed it to the fact that I have 3 brothers, and I grew up kind of like a tomboy, and my dad is like super hyper masculine and disciplined and structured and strict. And so I always was, mountain biking and snowboarding and skiing and wakeboarding and doing like boyish things, and I always had boyfriends and like male friends, and couldn't really relate to female energy a whole lot. And it's been something that's also been really interesting to look back on lately, because I think, I've had a lot of past life experiences that actually stemmed from that 90-day, 40-day silent retreat where, I'd be in a lucid dream, and then all of a sudden I'd be in a different body. And a lot of those bodies were male bodies, masculine bodies. And I think, it doesn't really matter why you have a more masculine predominating energy, but it is useful to know how you can balance that. So that's something that I've definitely been, and I think, you know, coronavirus in general, that's another thing that's been a huge message, is like, how can we incorporate more feminine into our society, as far as, you know, masculine is the producer and the you know, the energy of, you know, expression and instigation. It's like the initial igniting fire, but it's also capitalism and production and hierarchy and bureaucracy and all of these things that, when not balanced, they can be really detrimental to individuals and to communities and the globe. And I think that the feminine energy is much more receptive and more about being than doing. And that's just something that I think, you know, I don't know if you've read a lot about like different kalas or times that we go through as a globe, is that are like periods of thousands of years, but energetically, like in relation to astrology, there's also like globally periods of thousands of years where, you know, astrologers say that the earth is in globally a more masculine energy. And then, and right now, actually today, happy 12/12/20, supposed to be kind of this real dawn of the age of Aquarius, which is a more feminine energy. So globally, we are shifting to a more feminine energy, a more receptive energy of less doing and more being. And I think that that's been really difficult for people this year with COVID, you know, not being able to work and not being able to do what they normally do, and just have to be and be inside and be with themselves. So yeah, I mean, I don't have the right answer as far as like how those things should be properly balanced. I just know that like the tarot is, you know, like you mentioned with Marcy, she's a great tarot reader, truly. Like, she was my first exposure to tarot at the Omega Institute, and she did a chakra portrait of me that I think was really amazing. And yeah, I have, she's really good at what she does. And I think that that really is part of the beauty of the tarot. People that don't necessarily have, you know, a natural way to connect with different sides of themselves, the tarot can kind of help them do that, connect more with the feminine, when that's not something that, because I mean, like you're saying, even with mountain biking or skateboarding or anything, you can still do those things that are seemingly more masculine in a more feminine way. And essentially that's just, yeah, kind of balancing it. So it's interesting. There are different subtleties as far as like what's masculine, what's feminine, and how to like combine those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like with tarot in general too, I think it strengthens your like intuition. I think for me, I think it's like
Really?
like that, just learning to trust that you can make connections between things. I think there's like this, the masculine would be like kind of the rational mind, which, you know, we all know is very important to be able to deduce what's the right thing to do in this, you know, how do I logically figure something out. But there's also a lot of things where you don't have enough information to rationally clearly make the best decision. So sometimes you have to intuit it based on like, well, I made the connection between what that person was saying and like the way they acted, and you just pick up all these things. And I think tarot is sort of a practice for like, all right, you know, what that person's face looks weird, like they seem to be smiling, you know, I don't know why, but they feel like they're smiling, and I'm seeing that next to this card, you know. And so you kind of learn to trust your own story making apparatus and trust. And I think that's important when it comes to also knowing like balancing out, because I don't think everyone needs an equally balanced masculine and feminine. I think everyone has different levels of that, and in different sectors. So it's like you need to sort of intuit who it is that you are and what is appropriate for the moment. You know, do you push harder here, or do you know, hold back a little bit?
Totally. Yeah, that makes total sense. The tarot definitely, I mean, and once again, it comes back to what deck you're using and what school of thought you're using, because if
That's
it's
true.
the Western occultism, typically with the heavy emphasis on will, and like I don't want to say the ego, but yeah, like masculine energy is predominating in Western culture, including Western esotericism and Western occultism. And I think that the tarot in a like stemming from a system of masculine dominance and that is Western occultism, it definitely has a more feminine overarching vibe, because the whole point of it is to connect you with your intuition. So it does strengthen your intuition, which is a feminine quality. So Jesse, to speak to your part about like your experience with Marcy, and you have this super intense reading, and then there's tears and whatever else, I think that a lot of people do use tarot to connect with their feminine side. And it doesn't mean that they need to do that more often to connect with their feminine side. It's just like, that's a way that you can do that. And I think that intuition is definitely, intuition and the heart definitely have more feminine characteristics than, rational thought and logic and kind of what we were talking about before. But yeah, I think that that's a totally good point, that intuition is kind of like the trump of the tarot, or like the point. I don't know, I think intuition is something that we're needing more of in our lives, and the tarot is an excellent way to connect with that. And it really does strengthen it, because I'm sure you've experienced with your tarot readings, like you do a reading and you're like, oh, I kind of like, you have this feeling, this intuitive feeling, like I kind of knew that, but the tarot is reflecting it back at you, and you're like, fucking right, my intuition was spot on. I just needed that visual or expressive representation of that to kind of glare at me as a mirror back in the face.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's almost what were you gonna say, Jesse?
I was just gonna ask Megan if she could speak on, like, did you have any influence from your parents like guiding you towards spirituality, or did you find all of this on your own through, like you said, you were feeling like some of your illnesses that were coming up for you drove you to Omega Institute? But I didn't know, like, I cannot at this point, as much as we all like to like, rip on our parents occasionally, like my parents had a big impact on me, taking us to Grateful Dead shows, taking us to Omega Institute when my brother and I were children, and like we were like handed crystals and all of these things like from a very early age. So I know that's not everybody's like path or experience with it, but I just like some of the things you're saying, I'm like so humbled. I'm like, you're going here to do a 90-day workshop in Guatemala. Like, man, my biggest trip is like to go paint graffiti in some underground building in Chiang Mai. Like, dude, what am I doing? But so I just wondered if somebody got you started on that path, or if it was just all like stuff that you came to on your own.
Totally. Well, first of all, there's like no comparison as far as like big trips. Cause that's like a lot of people told me whenever I came back from India with COVID, they were like, oh man, like I got COVID too, but it definitely wasn't as bad as your experience in India with no hospital and no healthcare. And it's like, there's really no comparison there. It's just like everyone's experience is unique and valid and just different. But yeah, I think that my mom is actually the person who brought me to the Omega Institute for the first time. So for sure, my parents had an influence. I like to say that my dad is like one of my biggest teachers and biggest gurus, in the sense that he is 100% the most difficult person that I know in my life. He's the opposite of spiritual, like does not believe in spirituality, he fluctuates between agnostic and atheist. He doesn't like to talk about greater powers or religion or anything spiritually. He doesn't allow, like when I was growing up, I had these very strong experiences growing up. So I grew up on an alligator ranch in South Louisiana. I guess we should kind of say that, because that definitely had an influence. So, yeah, it's called Instigator. You can feel free to look it up.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's definitely like, that had a huge influence on my upbringing, and that is my dad. Like, he is an alligator rancher of, there's 3,000 alligators to this day in my parents' backyard, and he's very much like all about masculinity, like discipline and structure and all of that. So in many ways that was really damaging to me and my siblings. He was quite violent and abusive throughout different phases of our life and of that experience. And I think part of that is just like he had no, like, he wasn't raised in a way to connect with his feelings and emotions and effectively handle and express those things. And I think, you know, I have 4 siblings, so I'm one of 5 kids, and we were all kind of like his little, he didn't have any employees to manage 3,000 alligators. It was all us. So it was super stressful for him and really taxing on like the family dynamic. But it wasn't necessarily just the alligator ranch. It was also just the fact that like he was raised in a way that like emotions were never talked about. And anyway, so he was one of my greatest, and continues to be one of my greatest teachers as far as kind of like, you know, spending more time with my emotions, spending more time with ease and receptivity and peace. And but anyway, he wouldn't let us burn incense or burn candles, and that was something that, or like have crystals around or any religious relics or anything. And you know, if I would try and like close my door in my room as a child and like secretly do these things, he would like inevitably come bursting in. And you know, I try to lock my door, and then that was not okay. So then I try and take things outside so where he couldn't find me. And it was like always kind of trying to do these things in secret in a way, which was really weird and really unique aspect of my childhood. But it was also super unique and weird because my mom was the opposite. She was like, yeah, you know, I think that's a great, you should totally practice that. You should totally connect with, you know, crystals and incense and prayer and whatever way. And I think that it was something, you know, long story short, she was the first person to introduce me to the Omega Institute. And I think that in many ways she was so passionate about sharing those things with me because of her relationship with my dad. Like, they never got a divorce. They're still super unhappy and married. And it's just strange. But I think that in some ways, like, we all have like addictions to toxic things in our life. And I think that sometimes that can be a relationship. And sometimes you kind of feel like you need that to bring that lighter aspect. Like, you need that really like dense, heavy darkness, masculine, toxic masculine energy, so that you can have the opposite of like this really buoyant feminine energy that brings a lot of light. So I think, you know, as much as I want to like hate on my dad sometimes because he can be really difficult, I think that a lot of his toxicity has been necessary for my mom and for myself. And I think that that's, you know, like a difficult topic to dive into as far as boundaries and stuff like that. But yeah, my parents definitely, long story short, had a huge influence. And my mom is quite a spiritual person, but she tells me all the time, she's like, you know, I definitely like feel like I helped start you on this journey, but you've like really gone full speed ahead in this particular direction that, you know, she doesn't meditate, she doesn't practice yoga, she reads about these things and she enjoys learning about them, but she doesn't actually really practice them herself. So that's something that I've just like started on my own, but she kind of, or I guess followed on my own, but she definitely started, like helped me start on my path.
What a blessing. Thanks, Mom. That's awesome.
Totally, definitely. Yeah, what about you guys? I guess you said that, you know, your parents took you to Grateful Dead shows. I mean, that's another thing, is my dad has great taste in music. He turned me on to Led Zeppelin and a lot of, yeah, he gave me his record player. And I think music is like such an important aspect of spirituality and just connection with nature and connection with yourself and connection with the divine and connection with everything. So I definitely appreciate him for, you know, turning me on to some really great sounds and really great music. But so it sounds like you all have the same experience as far as music. And
yeah, we were really blessed to go to some Dead shows. It was really, really eye-opening. I think it was obviously eye-opening to be 3-4 years old at one of these concerts in San Francisco. But like, it just made it very clear that there was like the world that my parents were divorced. So there was the world that we like went to this private school. My mom had us wear uniforms. She's not very spiritual, very like, she's not even really religious, but the Christian school was her deal. So when we'd like go to this, like my dad's house on the weekend, we'd go to this show, or we would even go to like other different, there's like Green Gold Zen Center he loves in Marin County, and even doesn't have to be a Dead show, but we'd go and see this like other world. you know, and I was always like, this is the world that I want to hang out in. And you know, there's like a lot of that's not necessarily true for like my brother, for example. He like does something that's completely different from me, but we both were at a lot of the same events together, and it's almost like we did like a 180. So like he went this way, I went the other way. And
Right.
you know, I really liked what you were saying about like your dad being really a difficult person. And I mean, I love my pops. He's an amazing human being. But there's things that like it took me to, I don't know, 30, 31 years old till I started to be like, hey, you know, some of that trauma and like damage done by some of my like that my parents have done, I'm actually grateful for now. Like it's actually made me who I am today. Even though it's like you have an opinion and they never said sorry, and you know, like when you really, really process your traumas, you're almost like you almost look back at them like, thank you, you know, thank you for doing this.
Yeah, definitely. I 100% agree with that. And like you said, it's not until like I reached 30 that I really feel like I had that awareness and that gratitude. And I think that, yeah, and what you like, that's a beautiful expression that it's not really until you fully process the trauma and process that experience that you start to have gratitude for it. Because if you're kind of running from it and suppressing it, you're holding on to it, you know. And yeah, I think that that's a really great way to say it, like processing it. And yeah, that allows you to have gratitude. What about you, Aaron?
Oh, yeah, I grew up in a very Christian household. We were like Southern Baptist, and so, um, yeah, I think about it. I think about it a lot, you know, especially because I've kind of pivoted from that. Although I sometimes like been thinking about like ways that I could kind of reincorporate some ideas from Christianity back in, but like, um, yeah, I think a lot of it, while it became very alienated from like kind of mainstream Christianity in the United States, uh, I am grateful because it did give me a sense of spirituality in general. Like there is more to reality. There's something beyond what you can see. And I think I've always been fascinated with that, and it did get me started on that journey. I think though I believe that, you know, the Southern Baptist Church or a lot of Christianity nowadays, like Protestant Christianity, and is very like kind of McDonaldified or something. You know what I mean? It's very like I don't know. It's very corporate in a way. It's like kind of just trying to be very pleasing and soft and easy. I do think that there are these like really ripe kernels of truth that are like, you know, you jump off and it's like I had this crazy experience, and I always wanted to follow that. So that's sort of what led me further into those realms, like exploring psychedelics or exploring meditation. It's like, oh, I want to know what it's like to feel that. That sounds cool. You know, like you're I'm just trying to fathom like a 90-day meditation with 40 of those days spent on like lucid dreaming. You know, because I did Vipassana, which is very much the opposite of something like that, you know, even
Yeah.
though it's very much like there's nothing crazy going on. There Vipassana is almost like that's like the thing that atheists should do if they want to get into it, because it's like none of that shit matters. There's no you know, there doesn't have to be any higher realm or anything. It's just you here now. That's it. That's all you're paying attention to. And
Yeah.
I think, yeah, so it's crazy to think of like, man, focusing on like dreams and like tarot cards. That sounds crazy. I kind of want to do something like that sometime.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I definitely recommend it. It's kind of funny though, because it's like I said earlier, anything can be medicine and anything can be poison. Because I actually recommended that to one of my friends who I thought
Oh
would
yeah.
love it, and she like went full 180 and was like, "This is not for me. This is the devil." And she comes from, you know, like a super like conservative Christian Pentecostal family. So I think she had a lot of things from her childhood kind of come up, but it was almost traumatizing for her. So I
Mm.
think, you know, if you're not in the right headspace for something like that, it can be the opposite of medicine. But if I, I used to say I recommend it to everyone. Everyone should do this because I thought it was such a great experience. But now it's like if you have a like calling for that, I think that it will be a great experience for you. And actually, you know, I definitely recommend it to you because you already have like this this attraction towards tarot, and on top of that, you know, the tarot, both the Merce and the Waite Rider deck have quite a bit of Christian influence, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that in some ways that's why it's a little bit easier for Westerners to connect with Western esotericism or the tarot as opposed to Eastern tradition and Eastern thought, because it has that Christian influence and that kind of monotheology type of thing, as opposed to like millions of gods that is Eastern thought. And yeah, lucid dreaming is just like one of my favorite passions. I love it so much. I think it's the coolest thing. And yeah, I would always recommend that to anyone, because talk about the tarot being a reflection of the subconscious. There's nothing about it, like nothing like exploring the subconscious as lucid dreaming. It's just, I feel like that is the ultimate subconscious exploration.
How do you lucid dream? Do you like consciously lucid dream? And I mean that like with intention, like you intentionally lucid dream, or yeah?
Yeah, and that's I think that's actually why I really wanted to go learn about it and spend time just focused on doing that, because for me, it doesn't really come naturally. It's something I really have to will or intend, and you can't be attached to it. You have to have this like buoyant expectation, because yeah, if you're too attached, it's not going to happen as it should. But if you don't really, you know, I'm always amazed by people that just lucid dream as kids and it just like
Yeah.
on accident. Do you do that?
No, no, not even close. Yeah, I barely remember dreams.
Jesse, were you nodding? Do you do that?
Oh, I can lucid dream, but like it's never by intention, no. But
Okay.
maybe 1 out of 10 nights or something, I'll have this feeling that it's almost like I'm going over the drop of a roller coaster, like my stomach goes up, and then I usually start to like fly or change the environment pretty quickly. But
Right.
you know, I never really thought much of it other than just like these are some weird dreams. But then I was reading Carlos Castaneda and The Art of Dreaming. Oh my gosh, because that was really cool. Because now I at least translating what I got from his work, it was kind of like that first drop that I hit is kind of what he calls the first gate, and then there's like another gate, and then another gate, and then so typically I'd say, yeah, I can lucid dream, but I'm probably stuck in one of these three little gates because your subconscious will start to notice that you're aware and will start to close in on you.
Right.
It'll
Exactly.
convince you that you're like doing something wrong, or it's like the cops. I mean, whatever it is, like it will freak you out. But you can like, I think you can. I mean, you'd have to speak to this more than me, but I'm pretty sure you can realize like and then relax yourself and stay in that space longer if you're conditioned to do so.
Totally. And that's why I also, because I really got into lucid dreaming also from a Western occultism perspective, and Carlos Castaneda, which is also more of a Western perspective with Mexico and Central America. And but then there's the whole Buddhist, which is also kind of in line with Vipassana, which I've also done. So I can definitely speak to the benefits of Vipassana, just very different types of silence. But yeah, the Buddhist perspective of dream yoga, essentially,
Mm-hmm.
you know, there's lucid dreaming and then there's dream yoga, which kind of are very similar in a lot of ways and have a lot of yeah, commonalities and crossovers, but the intention is very different. Because for me, lucid dreaming can be a great way to process trauma, can be a great way to heal, it can be a great way to imagine and explore and create. But for the dream yoga practitioners and yogis of the East, it was essentially a deeper connection to God and to enlightenment, because, you know, we have the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and, you know, when we're bringing those together through lucid dreaming, like that is right, like the step before enlightenment. And so I think it's really cool to kind of think of it in that way, because there is, like you said, there's so much that you could do in a lucid dream. You can fly, you can change the experience, change the dream, create the dream, will the dream. And really it's kind of like our conversation about psychedelics earlier. It's kind of why I got out of psychedelics too, because it affects lucid dreaming. Whereas if you use meditation, you can sustain a lucid dream a lot longer. Um, than, and that's, you know, the yoga side of lucid dreaming. If you are meditating in your dream, which is just like this really weird state of consciousness and like level that of consciousness that you can kind of achieve. And if you can get there, and you can really like, you can explore past lives, you can process trauma, you can heal certain parts of your body, you can heal aspects of traumatic relationships with yourself and with others. You can also, in my opinion, I really am passionate about lucid dreaming because I think it's like really what it means to be human. I really have this belief that I'm not really quite sure where it came from, but that humans are meant to be multi-dimensional creatures, and we can have an active life and an active existence in a different dimension while we sleep. And I think that, rest is important, and like unconscious, dreamless sleep is definitely important, but there are definitely realms and dimensions that I've been to in lucid dreams that are like of the gods, something that is not, because you can be in this physical realm and kind of like that's where lucid dreaming comes close to astral traveling, where you can kind of like hover in this physical dimension, which is cool, but really like this state that you can achieve where you're in this energy bodiless form dimension of the gods. I think that is like the coolest thing ever. And if you can, develop a practice where you can experience that transcends kind of like our human life. And what it means for this human life is that when you come back into your physical body and lead your like daily life, it's kind of more enriched because you've had this experience. And like, honestly, what I like to call it is like the realm of the gods. You've been there and it's like, holy shit. And then you come back here and you just like have more appreciation for the human experience, if that makes sense. So I really kind of think that that's why I really love to talk about lucid dreaming and love to share those experiences and encourage people to explore that, because I think that it just makes the human experience that more multidimensional and that more enriched.
I'm curious what you would think, because so transurfing also has a thing about that, and he kind of makes the writer of it is named Vadim Zeland. He's like Russian. Anyways, he says that dreaming is essentially, it's like the same reality, but in dreams your consciousness is not tethered to like any kind of physical form, so there's no mass. So intentions can be they're like instantaneous, whereas like in this reality, everything moves a lot slower. So you have an intention to maybe say manifest a goal, whatever, get a job or something. It takes a long time, depending on what lifeline you're in, to mold and to switch. It's like you're moving through water, you can't turn as quickly, but when you're moving through air, you can turn a lot quicker. And so he kind of says that practicing that in dreams, you learn that your intention can completely shape the dream like immediately. And so you taking lessons from that, you can apply them to your life in this realm, which is a little bit slower. I'm curious what, do you feel like that resonates with you, I guess?
Totally. And I think that's why in some ways I think that dreaming or lucid dreaming is kind of like this mind lab. Like if you have something that you want to create in this physical reality, you can create it in the dream world with much less, effort, I guess, or what's the word, like consequence or something. And if you like it and it's working in that realm, then you can come back to this reality in this realm and be like, all right, it's going to be a lot more difficult. There's going to be a lot more inertia and resistance to creating that here, but I know that it's possible, and you can have that greater faith and that greater certainty that can happen. So I think that's really kind of one of my favorite aspects of lucid dreaming is I just really love the imagination. I think the imagination is like, so beautiful. I think it's such a great gift that humans have the ability to use. And the imagination in the dream realm is infinite. So if you can like explore that there with lucid dreaming, then that definitely carries and enhances your waking life in a way that nothing else does, in my opinion.
Do you have like do you like to imagine, like not in dreams, but do you like to imagine kind of different situations in your life, just kind of like, I guess, like I hesitate to use the word like fantasize, because that sometimes has like more meanings, but like imagine like situations like play in a playful way. Like and like would you say that lucid dreaming has informed that?
Yeah, definitely. That's such a complex question because they're like I'm trying to think of like a specific
Yeah,
example of what I
here,
would imagine.
I'll clarify it. Like, so I feel like, through doing a lot of kind of Western occult practices, things like that, I would say, like law of attraction kind of things, or like think and grow rich, new thought kind of stuff. A lot of it is like visualization, and there's a long history of visualization in Eastern mysticism as well. But I was like, okay, like trying to visualize, and I realized that my visualizing muscle, while I probably had it a lot as a kid, has definitely been suppressed. And I would, and I think a lot of people, we were really good at visualizing bad things happening. Like I can see a car hitting me as I cross the street, very clearly. But seeing, like getting a lot of money, or getting a something that I really want, can be a lot more difficult to imagine. And so as I started doing this, I started just going like, and I think tarot is part of this too. It's like imagining possibilities, like but just like fun, like fanciful ones. Like, what if I got on a roller coaster and then the roller coaster actually shot off and I flew, and then I was able to fly in this roller, and just like kind of imagine like fun, exciting things. Like, what if I'm just like walking to the grocery store and then someone like stops and they're like, hey, like almost like movies, or like what could the most amazing thing be that could happen to me on my way to work today? And I feel like a lot of times we don't just play with that kind of imagination. And so I'm curious, like, if your experience in lucid dreaming has maybe encouraged that type of behavior in you, and if it's had a positive effect.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good question. So I'm definitely off, like currently speaking, I'm definitely off my lucid dream practice just because I've been so busy with other things. So the last time I really got into lucid dreaming was when I was in India, about probably 9 months ago now, just because I had the time freedom there. But yeah, and I like that you use kind of more playful, mundane examples because when you first mentioned the question, I was thinking like more like visualizing or imagining like big realities in life, like not you know I wasn't specifically thinking like world peace, but just like something like politically or as a nation or community wide. But I really like your examples of more personal things to use imagination and visualization and you know I have sometimes when I contemplate things and have these conversations with people, my brain goes from anything from like the most micro of the microcosm to the greatest macro of the macrocosm, and it's hard to kind of hone it in. So I appreciate when people kind of help me do that, but it's my brain's doing that right now because really I would say the most common or that I would use imagination and visualization would be in meditation. And I think that that's like a really untapped resource for health and wellness that people don't use, is that I've had incredible success healing my physical, mental, emotional body with imagination and visualization. And Jesse, when we first started this Zoom talk, we were talking about how I took a cell level healing class in 2012 with Joyce Hawks, and she was really big into that, like visualizing and imagining the cellular processes in your body. And you can physically and scientifically, they've proven with scientific, double-blind tests, the power of the imagination and visualization on a cellular level. And I think that that's a really untapped, beautiful resource, and probably the most common way I use imagination and visualization. But also, like as far as relation to lucid dreaming, when you first start practicing lucid dreaming, I'm sure you guys have used the tactic where you kind of like test your surroundings, like test, yeah, anything around you, like walls, can you walk through them, light switches, like a variety of whatever surrounding environment. And that has definitely influenced my waking life because in order to have more success lucid dreaming, I need to bring that to my waking, like that practice to my waking life. So testing light switches when I'm awake, and, you know, testing walls, just because it comes a habit and it comes a pattern, so that it's easier to do when I'm sleeping. And that's something that I'll do like with my surroundings. You know, I ride my bike to work about 5 miles each way, and I'll like test my surroundings, and I'll imagine different scenarios while I'm like riding my bike. You know, what if a rabbit were gonna just cross the path in front of me, or, you know, just like random things. And sometimes it actually happens. It's like, there's a cat, you know, and it's like, I was just thinking, like, what if a cat crossed my bike path? And then it happened. So it is like this weird, yeah, conversation with your surroundings and conversation with reality in some ways. In some ways it really trips you out, because what you're imagining and what you're visualizing actually happens in a manifesting type of way. And some of it's just like super far off, that, you know, nothing like that would ever happen, but it's still a good gauge of like what is real, you know. So
There is an author that I recorded for a couple years ago. His name's Brett Kramer, and he's kind of like a spiritual conspiracy theorist, but he's also really, really into esoteric Christianity. Like translates the Bible in a way that I'm like, wow, I've never heard anybody say it this way. Really cool. But
totally.
Also really into like some super dark shit. Like he was speaking about, like, I don't know if you know what Moloch is, but it's like the dark, and it's like basically like the darkest energy that you could, if you really wanted to do black magic, you're gonna like send it to Voldemort, or, you know, they call it Moloch. And a lot of things about like human sacrifice and animal sacrifice to Moloch to get people to have power. And, you know, a lot of the things that QAnon was saying with, like, you know, even that in the like pedophilia stuff is connected to like worshiping this dark magic, according to Brett Kramer. But
Right.
you know, we were at Omega Institute, and typically it's like, you know, there's like the yoga moms, and there's like kind of like a look of like the workshop there, you know.
Yeah.
And this was like every single person was like tatted up, or looked like they were like played for Tool, or like this was like the most gnarly people. And he's like saying like a lot of what you're saying, like, you know, when you go to sleep especially, you can access these different realms, and like we're all existing in infinity all the time. So like just that this human life is not really like all that you are. Like you're doing so many things on so many levels, you know. And so he's like looking at his crowd, and he's like, a lot of you are like spiritual warriors on other planes, and this is your dream. This is your like chill out and don't get too stressed, because like you are working on such high levels and super intense up there. So you get to come back and be a human, and like this would be us dreaming, you know. So then to think of us getting worked up about our dream life, it's just,
Right.
you know, this is definitely not real, you know, or
Right.
you know, not permanent, I should say. Not
Yeah,
that,
I totally love that perspective, because I think it's so true. It's like, this is the dream. Like, why aren't people having more fun? And I totally, you know, can relate to like the worries that we have as far as, you know, like racism and poverty and uh, like politics. Like that shit is shit. Like, yeah, it's easy to get worked up over, but also it's like, you know, like it's that same Christian prayer, like accept the things that you can't change and change the things that you can, you know. And I think that it would be really cool if people recognized what they can change and what they can't, because a lot of what people complain about is changeable, you know. And I wish people in some ways would be more active roles in society to help promote those changes. And, you know, to speak to the darkness thing, I know that Carlos Castaneda speaks a lot about that element of darkness, because you can get stuck and kind of engulfed in dark practices and dark magic and darkness itself. And I think that that was something that when I was really getting into lucid dreaming and astral travel and kind of projecting my soul and my energy to realms that I really knew nothing about, there would be like some absolutely horrifying, terrifying places that I would find myself, not in my physical body, but my energetic body, where everything was like very, very dark, and it was terrifying. But if you just kind of focus on the light, and, you know, that term or like that idea kind of is definitely getting more poo-pooed on these days, because people are like, that's just toxic positivity and toxic, you know, lightness or whatever. And I can understand that aspect and that perspective as well. But when you're in like this realm of darkness and horrifying energy that isn't just visually dark, but like you can feel it in your soul that this is like a very dark place, like it's essential for you to focus on the light. It's essential for you to focus on the positive, and because then that's what you're going to attract, and that's what's going to pull you out of the darkness. And there's definitely, I'm sure you've read in Carlos Castaneda's work, like you can get into these places where you feel like you're never going to wake up from this lucid dream. You're never going to come back from this dimension or this experience. And really, I've had those experiences, and the only thing that brings you back is the light, you know? So I understand, like, yeah, the perspective of toxic positivity, and I'm not an advocate of that. But I think that there is a time and place to recognize the light and the positivity within some really densely dark things. And I think, you know, like society and globally, we're kind of experiencing a little bit of that right now. So worth noting, I guess.
Yeah, I think there is like, I feel like there's a distinction to make. Like we need to, as a society in general, kind of nail down what is actually meant by toxic positivity, because I usually just see that as being deceitful. Like you're deceiving yourself in order to like run away from feelings, whereas I think the real positivity is like it involve it, because like you can look at things one of two ways. You can look at like, this is for me or this is against me, you know, kind of thing. And it's like, yeah, a dark force that might appear, or a really bad, such a scary, horrifying situation, you know, it might be very painful, but it can lead you, if you are willing to let you take it there. And I think in order to get through those things, you do have to give yourself something. And it doesn't necessarily mean like, you know, if you're failing, telling yourself, I'm rich, I'm so, you know, I whatever, lying to yourself. But I think there is like this aspect of, I'm going in the right direction. I can get through this. This isn't going to end, you know, this is going to make me stronger or better or happier in the end. And those are things that I think that's like, there's no lie there, but it's something that you can, it's an approach, instead of saying like, this is going to kill me, this is going to hurt, this is going to be the worst thing I've ever had to deal with. Because it's like, when you do that, I feel like you leave out the possibility, that's like very rational minded, right? And you leave out the possibility of something zany, something crazy, only like a dream, you know, like dreams, I imagine, and tell me if I'm wrong here, but that even in lucid dreams, you don't have total control. Things still pop up out of nowhere that you didn't expect. And I think it's like, in reality too, like you have to, learning to trust your intuition means learning to trust that like, oh, the person that the random acquaintance I met, the person who just randomly talked to me at the bus stop or something, like they might have some clue or key that would help me get through this thing, or they might unlock a whole realm of possibilities that I hadn't seen before, you know. And I think that it's like in the darkest moments, that's where that stuff really becomes valuable.
Yeah, totally. And I think I mean, I really just think that lucid dreaming enhances everything. And that's kind of the thing, because like you said, there's certain aspects of lucid dream that you can control, and certain aspects that you can't. And, you know, the more practice you have with that, the better you become at recognizing that. And the universe, you know, like the random person at the bus stop, or, you know, like the universe does speak to us. It is intelligent, whether or not it's literally through other people that are verbally speaking to us, or through inanimate objects, or through plants or nature or animals. You know, it's the radio. I don't know about you all, but I always like get these crazy messages through the radio, and I'm like, what the hell, you know? I think that that's really beautiful, but you have to be aware of it. And I think, to speak to the whole like toxic positivity, you kind of brought up a good point that I think a lot of that, it's where it gets tricky is when it's between two people, you know. It's I mean, you can be toxically positive towards yourself for sure, but I feel like it tends to come up more like interpersonally than intrapersonally. And you know, a lot of my experience too with relationships has been you know, leading by example of how I want the relationship to be, not trying to, because, you know, people can get stuck in this negative loop of, you know, whether it's, you know, speaking about mental health as far as depression or anxiety, using the imagination for really negative things, manifesting our fears, or really just like meddling in our fears. And that's totally understandable. I've 100% been there, but it's really difficult to continue to watch our loved ones do that and not say anything. So that's kind of where toxic positivity comes in, because you try and like help them break that negative loop. But ultimately, like, that is toxic. Like, even though it could be true, it is kind of toxic positivity, because they need to be the ones to break that negative loop. And you can only kind of be the example. You can't tell them that to like not continue to focus on whatever's causing their depression or the trauma that's causing their PTSD or anxiety or whatever else. Like, that needs to be processed, and you can't even tell them how to process it. So it's such a tricky thing with that, you know?
No, totally. I think it's all, oh, what was it? It was like, there's a thing. Oh, it's like, or because something bad happens, you know, quote, bad, it's because you're not positive enough, you know. Oh, the reason you got sick is because you're not vibing with the universe correctly and stuff like that. And it's like, oftentimes that doesn't necessarily, like, it can also be that because you are in tune with the universe, you got sick because the universe needed to show you something, you know. Kind of
Totally.
like what you were saying with coronavirus.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like that's the thing, is like surrender to that destruction and surrender, like, this is gonna sound so cliche, but be down with that sickness, because it's like so fucking amazing, you know? It's like it'll change your life, but it's like you need to be down with the sickness until that sickness doesn't serve you anymore, and then you like transcend that, you know? But you can't just always avoid that, you know? And I think it is a fine line between, you know, knowing how long to sit with something that's really dark and be with that, and when to kind of say no, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, this conversation's gone way better than I expected, and it's been really, really, really interesting. Not the directions I thought it would be, but this is super cool. So I just want to say I'm so humbled that you came on the show and that you took the time to break down some of these concepts for us and for everybody that's listening or watching the show. But like, and I know you're in school right now, but do you see yourself like, is this coming up to like a point where you're gonna like write a piece, or you're gonna do like, you're gonna start teaching all of these things that you're coming through, because you're so knowledgeable, and I'm not just like trying to fluff you up here, but like you actually do explain it pretty good, and you're captivating enough that people, I think, would listen. So I don't know if that's something that like, is that something that you have intended, or that's like your subconscious is just like you're trusting in that it's going to bring you there when you're ready?
Yeah, I appreciate that question too. I mean, so I recently launched my own business. It's called Cloud9 Wellness Co. And basically you know, the co means a lot of different things. It kind of initially means wellness coaching or health counseling. But a lot of really what I want to do is collaboration. So I really appreciate you reaching out, because you know, there is a lot, you know, I spoke to this at the beginning of this, there's a lot that I want to get out and share with people, but I really don't think like I can do it. Not that I can't do it on my own, that's not a good way to phrase it, but it's better to do with the instigation and with the initiation of other people, and that communication really enhances it. You know, it's a lot, like, these conversations couldn't happen if it was just a conversation with myself, if I were just producing this on my own. So yeah, basically where I see myself going professionally with my Cloud9 Wellness Co. and everything is definitely sharing. I plan on, you know, creating classes for lucid dreaming and creating programs that you can, like, you know, purchase a pre-recorded package of like intro to lucid dreaming, intro to meditation, intro to breath work, like those types of things, kind of with the intention of healing and health and wellness, because that would be like the platform in which I was, you know, using that to express. But ultimately, yeah, and then that kind of I see going to a physical form, as far as I'd really like my goal in life in the next 5 years. My 5-year plan is to either create, open, or collaborate with other alternative and complementary healthcare providers and practitioners in some realm of public health that's free for the public and, you know, funded by the government to access, you know, really like elementary and beginner level of these things, but visualization meditations, really easy health and wellness practices, yoga, meditation, diet, exercise, things like that. And actually have like a teaching kind of clinic where I'm teaching these things in a clinical uh, scenario or environment. And really, like as far as deeper levels of this, I would rather, like, I kind of see that as being more collaborative. So connecting with artists and connecting with people like yourself and just anyone, and creating a community. So that's kind of the other aspect of Cloud9 Wellness Co. And kind of where I see myself going is really doing a lot of collaboration and connection and conversation with individuals that are also interested in similar things. So yeah, I'm all about like collaboration through and like interdisciplinary stuff, because I'm really into like the science and anatomy and cellular stuff of it all, but I really love incorporating art and incorporating physical movement and dance and music. So I think that, but that's not my expertise, but it's so powerful. So I think it would, that's another benefit of collaboration, is I can do a lot of interdisciplinary stuff that creates some really like awesome shit.
Yeah, this show's been really, really eye-opening, at least for me. Just also to look back and be like, oh wait, there's this amazing network of people that I've met over the years, and like you all you got to do is put them on a conversation like this and let them express themselves, and you're just like, they're even more amazing than I thought. And right. To me, that is like, if I took anything away from like the Buddhism and things I've tried to study like that, like the trick is to like, you're not the Buddha, right? Like you kind of like got to go inside out, and like everything around you is the Buddha. So like by even just hosting the show and putting my friends on, like we're gonna cross over networks, we're gonna cross promote, and I think like just cross pollinating with people that are like-minded, or like even just on the fringe. Like I think being a psychedelic graffiti artist, like I'm pretty fringe based. There's like not that many people out there, doing that type of thing. But like it's important for me to come back and connect with somebody like you that's grounded. You have your approach to life is very different. And, I think that there could be people in your audience or your network that could be like, hey, that painting is cool. Or whose track was that? Oh, that's Aaron's track. Like, I've never heard of this trap DJ, but now I want to, check out his next album or whatever. Like just the cross pollination of this network that has been created by places like Omega Institute, and just kind of like consciousness, as it can only go as fast as it can, but like it's creating these pockets. And I'm really excited because I feel like we're just getting to the point now where like we're starting to like tiptoe onto the scene a bit more, and it's our turn. It's like we can't depend on generation to just do everything for us. Like it is our turn to step up.
Totally. And we have these resources like the internet and like Facebook Live and IG Live and all of this stuff, which can be used for such amazing things. Like there's honestly like a lot of crap on the internet, and I feel like it's just overflowing with that sometimes, like TikTokers and just stuff that like, I don't know, is just like not really quality. So I'm really an advocate for like a lot of quality stuff on the internet. And sometimes I get held up with doing Facebook Lives or IG Lives or connecting with people because I want, I really prioritize quality over quantity. And I know a lot of people that put stuff on the internet, whether it's podcasts or live stuff or whatever it is, posts in general, they really like, in order for the algorithms to be right, they strive for quantity, like every day posting something. And I think that inevitably that kind of leads to a little bit of a decrease in quality, but I'm the opposite extreme where I'm like, I want this to be golden and perfect. So I don't have a lot of quantity. So yeah, and like you were saying earlier, sometimes you just got to like go on live, because like a lot of really amazing stuff comes from that, and you couldn't even plan that, but you don't know until you actually do it. So I'm super grateful and thankful for the both of you. And I think that, continue. Like I'd love to, look forward to looking into who you all feature on your show more, and looking into your work more. And like I was telling you, Jesse, I have a lot of graffiti friends down here in New Orleans that I'd love to connect you with at some point, that are great artists and great musicians as well. So yeah, I think that this is an invaluable platform to be able to connect fringe people, because I also feel like I'm quite a fringe person. Like one of my favorite things that I forgot to mention is group lucid dreaming. I think that stuff is like life-changing. You can lucid dream with your best friends, and like, what is cooler than that? You know what I mean? And like, in that lucid dream, you can go skateboarding, snowboarding, like all the things you like to do in this, like physical dimension, you can do in a lucid dream without these like concepts of gravity. You can like fly with your friends together in a lucid dream. And I think that that's super duper cool. So yeah, I just think that that's a fringe thing that, it's really been difficult for me to find people that are like, yeah, I'm down, let's group lucid dream. Like there's no one, and I'm like, where are you? Where are my people? So I feel super on the fringe, but yeah, so hopefully we can connect people that actually are interested in these things, and we can like really do some amazing stuff. I think that that's definitely a possibility, and I appreciate you all for initiating that.
100%. I really hope that you decide to board the ship again. This is Pirate Utopia, so this is kind of our online pirate ship, our online hangout.
I love that. It's a great name.
Are we shouting out or plugging anything else for you before we wrap it up, or how's everybody feeling?
I feel pretty great. Yeah. Like I said, there's not a whole lot of content on Cloud9 Wellness Co. But if you all are on Instagram, I don't have anything on Facebook yet. So please.
Cloud9 on Instagram?
Yeah, Cloud9 Wellness Co. And it's just like all one word, all letters, no numbers. And hopefully in the future, I'll be doing more collaborations. I'd love to have you all on with, like I said, anything can be medicine. Anything can help people towards wellness. So the more people we can get tuned in on that platform, the better. And I'd love to, promote you all's stuff. So anything you want me to plug, like more collaboration, the better. So happy to do that.
Totally.
Yes. Namaste, sister.
Yeah.
You're epic.
Yeah. Next time I go to New Orleans fairly regularly. Next time I'm there, I'll have to hit you up. Hopefully it's not during COVID or whatever. But yeah, I have a lot of friends over in New Orleans.
Yeah, definitely hit me up. It's honestly been so strange being back here because, like I said, I got back in July, but I was born and raised here, and it's like I haven't lived here in like 10 years. So, and I'm kind of a different person now. So most of my connections are over Zoom or on the internet. So I'd love to see people in like physical person in New Orleans that have similar interests. So definitely hit me up. I'd love to host you or love to see you if you're in the area.
Awesome. Well, cool. Yep. Just followed you. Let's stay in touch. Good to meet you.
Yeah, very nice to meet you, but we'll meet you, Aaron, and good to see you, Jesse. It's been freaking almost over 8 years now.
Yeah.
So cool.
Crazy. It was a fast 8 years, it seems like.
It was. For sure. It's been like super long, but also super fast.
Totally. So much love. Things are dinging and binging over here, so
time's up.
Totally.
We're cooked.
Yeah,
well, good to see you all, and I look forward to meeting again.
Totally.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Megan.
Bye.